Good afternoon, second graders. It's Mr. Sargent here with your day 39 recap video for ELA and for science. Now, in ELA today, we started by talking about how events in a story can lead to just what the author is trying to teach us, or the central idea. After that, we got introduced to our new spelling words of the week that I can't wait to share with you. And we ended with science today, where we talked about the states of matter and how all the things that we've learned about with energy, how that can help with changing matter. So stay tuned. Before we get into today's ELA lesson, I wanted to thank everybody that participated last week in our anti-bullying program that we started on Monday, where we started reading 3 or 4 books, listening to stories, and letting kids share their own experiences. Now, by reading these books and by talking about it and discussing it, we were able to come up with a number of solutions and things that we can do if we see bullying, if we're being bullied, or maybe there's some things that we're doing that could be considered bullying. It's only through talking about it in education that anything is going to change. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am super proud of each and every one of you for the effort that you put in. And if you take a look behind me, you'll see a group of words that, well, will hopefully describe you. If you look around me, there's a common theme. Just like there was a common theme among all the stories that we read last week, there's a common theme with all these words. Well, can you pick it out? Well, what do all these words have in common? They're all nice words, aren't they? They're all positive words. And ladies and gentlemen, when dealing with bullying, it's important to stay positive. So once again, I thank each and every one of you for participating, and I look forward to seeing the future solutions that we come up with these problems. Our learning target for ELA this week is going to be, I can recount stories and identify major events that lead me to understanding the central message. Frankly put, it's I can identify events, I can see what happens in a story, and see how that teaches me a lesson. That central message is the lesson that you learn from reading the story. Now, if you think back at some of the stories that we read about anti-bullying last week, or folk tales and myths and fables, every story that you have read is going to teach you a lesson. Now, they don't just come out and tell you what the lesson is. They use events, problems, situations that our character goes through in order to teach us what to do if we're ever in a similar situation. So if you take a look at behind me, you'll see one of my favorite ways of storytelling, and that is using illustrations. Now, here we have 3 pictures. It starts off with kids playing and someone's not too happy. And that leads to, well, one of the people playing asks if the unhappy student wants to play with them. And then the final picture is they're all playing together. Now, can you remember what word that is defining that we learned last week? Well, if you said inclusion, you are correct. Now, if you remember, exclusion is not allowing someone to play with you. Inclusion is when you're playing a game with all your friends that you invite others who may not have anyone to play with you. So, what is the central message? What is the lesson that we learned through this? Well, be a friend. When you see someone that is not able to join in, have them join in anyways. All right? So, if we look, these pictures do tell us a central message, and it kind of connects with everything that we read last week. After that, we talked about our spelling list. Now, before we get into the list and what the words are, it's important to understand that this week in Google Classroom, I put this packet as an assignment. One of the cool things about technology is now that we're able to use Google Classroom, you're going to be able to type your answers, or in some cases even write your answers right on the worksheet and turn them in digitally, which is pretty cool. But I'm also going to be sending them to your parents, so if they need to print them out and you have that paper copy in your hand, you're going to have that option as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the words. This week's words have the U sound. That's the UE put together. When you put the U and the E together, it forms that U sound, almost like an EW. There's no long vowel sounds. In fact, there's short vowel sounds here with the U and the E. where you don't hear the letters being spoken, but when you put those two letters together, they create a very distinct sound. Ew. Go ahead, try it. Ew. Very good. All right, so our first 5 words are going to be sort of just our normal plain old sight words. All right, number 1, means. Number 2, old. Number 3, any. Number 4, same. And number 5, corn. Once again, these are just 5 sight words that we want you to be familiar with. Then we get into our pattern words. Now remember, with our pattern words, we have the oo sound. So make sure you can hear those sounds when you're pronouncing these words. Number 6 is blue. Did you hear it? Ooh, good. Number 7 is true. Number 8 is clue. Number 9 is glue. Number 10 is do. And number 11 is argue. Okay? All of those sounds at the very end, they have the U and the E, have that oo sound. Then our last 5 words are challenge words. Number 12 is listen. Now, if you listen to listen, you'll notice it has a silent letter. It's the letter T. In the word listen, you don't hear the T. Ladies and gentlemen, I said this before, this is what makes the English language so difficult sometimes. All right? They may have letter sounds that when you put together, sound something completely different. You have like the letter C that sometimes sounds like a K or an S. In this case, we have a letter that's in the word that is totally silent. So make sure when you're practicing it, you remember to put that T into listen. Number 13 is song. Number 14 is cause. Number 15 is speak. And number 16 is kind. Now, just as a reminder, all of these will be found on Class Dojo as well as your Google Classroom. And you can do the worksheets directly on Google Classroom and turn them in. In science today, we started by talking about states of matter. Now, we're not talking about states like in North Carolina or Maine or Florida. We're talking about the big 3 states of matter. We have liquid, we have solid, we have gas. Everything on Earth is made up of matter. And everything on Earth is either going to be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. So our introductory lesson today talked about what these different states of matter look like on the molecular level. Now, when I say molecular level, what I mean is everything is made up of molecules. Now, a molecule is the smallest, tiniest part of what something's made of. Now, I'm made of molecules, you're made of molecules, the air is made of molecules. This unicorn duck is made up of molecules. Now, what determines whether or not something is a liquid, a solid, or a gas is how close those molecules are to each other. When we're talking about a gas, if you notice, I'm able to move freely through the air. Well, that's because the molecules are very far apart and they're moving pretty fast. Molecules of air we don't see, just like any molecules we cannot see. But we know that they are so far apart that we're able to pass through them without even noticing that they're there. That's pretty cool. The next state of matter is liquid. Now, if something is a liquid, there's a few words that we use to describe it. One being wet. That's the easiest word to describe it. But if you really think about it, a liquid's molecules are a lot closer together than, say, a gas. You know, a gas we're able to pass through freely without even feeling it. A liquid, if you try to pass through it, you can actually feel it. In fact, the one word we would use to describe a liquid is wet. Think about jumping into a pool. Well, when you jump in, you're able to pass through the water in the pool pretty easily by swimming. But when you come out of the pool, how are you feeling? Well, you're probably feeling wet because what happens is, though we're able to pass through the molecules in the water, a lot of them will stick to us because there's not enough space for us to pass freely. So when we come out of a pool, we're really wet. And it's mainly because the molecules are so close together. And finally, our last state of matter is a solid. Now, when you think solid, you think hard, you think impenetrable, you can't pass through it. And that's truth. Because the molecules are so close together and they're barely even moving, we're not able to pass through a solid. We're able to pass through liquid, we're able to pass through gas, but a solid, because those molecules are so close together, we're not able to pass through them at all. So let's go ahead and test this and see if the information that I just told you about a liquid, solid, and a gas is accurate. So for the first test, we're going to have a container filled with air and see what happens when I dump it over my head. Well, if you noticed, nothing. Though the container was filled with air, the molecules were so far apart that not one of them touched me. Next, I have a container of liquid. What is going to happen when I dump this over my head? Well, if you said I'm going to get wet, you are absolutely right. If you notice, I'm still able to pass through the liquid, but those molecules that are in that liquid have now stuck to me and I am really, really, really wet. And finally, we have a container filled with solids. Now, what's going to happen here? Well, if you just noticed, I dumped them over my head and it hurt. Ladies and gentlemen, because the molecules are so close together, we should not try to pass through them. If you notice, all these objects did was just bounce off my head, and now my head is pretty sore. So now that I've dealt with liquids, solids, and gases, and I am wet and my head hurts from the solids, the question I have for you is this: how can I change one of the states of matter to another? How can I change a liquid to a gas? That would be kind of helpful right now since I am really wet right now. How can I change a solid into a liquid or even a gas? So I want you to think about how we would use heat energy to change these states of matter, and come to me with your answers tomorrow in class. So before I go clean up my mess and dry off a little bit, a couple things I wanted to say. First of all, I want to wish 3 students in particular, Omar, Jordan, and Nadia, a happy birthday. They celebrated their birthday this weekend, and I hope you all had an incredible time. As also a reminder, you do have 2 homework assignments that you can find on Google Classroom. One is the spelling packet for the week, as well as a science reading comprehension on states of matter. All right. Wednesday, we're going to be doing an experiment. So if you want to participate, it's a really fun and easy experiment. There's a few things that you're going to need. Make sure that you're checking on Class Dojo for those experiment details. So I think it's time for me to go clean up now. So I hope you have an incredible rest of the day.